Basically, one of the things that a lot of people my age on campus are talking about, they're very passionate about voting for Bernie Sanders, and I was telling them, look, you guys should really notice Jill Stein because she has an awesome campaign. And they're like, yeah, I agree more with Jill, particularly on your military policy, which is like not giving money to Israel for weapons. But they'll say that kind of what you were saying, voting for Bernie is like the lesser evil of compared to any of the Republicans. What would you have to say to them? Why would you encourage them to not sort of go be trapped between those two parties?
Great. Yeah, so in terms of Bernie, you know, I'll say I think what Bernie's doing is great inside the Democratic Party, and he's really stirring up a hornet's nest of discontent that was already there. He's just really elevating that discussion, and that's really wonderful. The downside is that the Democratic Party has a kill switch for rebellious candidates.
Oh yeah.
And they have done this for decades, ever since George McGovern managed to get the nomination in 1972. Democrats created Super Tuesday and superdelegates, which are both things that ensure that the nomination will go to an insider, not to a reformer. So it's unfortunate that Bernie's going to get knocked out, and you can see the resistance growing now, and Bill Clinton is recruiting the superdelegates, which are basically delegates that ensure that Hillary has the margin of difference if she should need it. So it virtually ensures that Bernie is going to be knocked out of contention. I think it's great for people to support his campaign, but at some point they're going to need a plan B so that all their work doesn't get dumped down the drain. Bernie has already said he's going to support Hillary when she gets the nomination, and I think most of his really ardent supporters don't want to go there. They don't want to support the banks. They don't want to support this, you know, this Walmart. The board member, Hillary, board member of Walmart, and they don't want to support the devastating foreign policies that have created failed states and created ISIS to start with, and the blowback of terrorism that we're getting. I think people with insight don't want to go there. So people need a plan B in Bernie's campaign. So I'd say, hey, you know, go for it. Give Bernie his best shot. Fingers crossed that he gets it, but I wouldn't hold my breath. And if he doesn't get it, you got a place to go. So I don't feel like we have an argument, you know, with Bernie's supporters. It's a different strategy. So, you know, I think your question had two parts. It was sort of what's our relationship to Bernie, and then what about why not the lesser evil? Bernie aside, why not? You know, why should young people not support the lesser evil? Well, one reason is that the lesser evil isn't going to get them out of debt.
Oh God.
Not going to get you out of debt. The lesser evil, you know, Hillary is not really proposing free public higher education, which is what we're calling for. Why is that? You know, because you shouldn't treat the younger generation like a cash cow to squeeze maximum, you know, dollars out of. Young people should have a secure start in life, which is what a high school degree used to represent. Now you need a college degree. So in my view, that is the responsibility of the older generation. However, it's an investment that pays for itself. We know that from the GI Bill. Every dollar that we put in to college education for returning soldiers following the Second World War, we get back $7 in return for every dollar we put in. So this is like not just a nice thing to do, this is the really profitable and you know, practical thing to do. So there's another reason why young people should not support the lesser evil. The expanding wars and the chaos that's being created that is blowing back at us right now in a very personal way. We're not going to see that get better under Hillary. The Trans-Pacific Partnership. Hillary may be talking the talk, however she has decades worth of walking the walk, and it's clear what Hillary's policies are. Hillary and her husband brought us NAFTA that closed tens of thousands of factories and sent millions of jobs overseas. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is more of the same. Hillary might tweak something about it, but she's a supporter of these corporate trade deals. So, if you want a job, if you want to get out of debt and have a future, and if you want to do something about the climate so that we actually have a planet we can inhabit, those are all reasons why you don't want to settle for the lesser evil. The lesser evil is getting lesser all the time, and we say it's time to forget the lesser evil and fight for the greater good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of the attacks in Paris, what do you think was behind Europe's failure to close their borders and not recognize that these attacks were imminent or that they were a threat?
Yeah, I mean, it reflects how the security state, totally misses the target. In this country, the security state has been challenged actually by a congressional committee to exactly identify what terrorist threats have been aborted thanks to the security state, and they couldn't come up with any. The NSA couldn't come up with any examples of success. Basically, it creates a much larger haystack in which to try to find the needle. So I think there are 2 points here, which is that, we need old-fashioned intelligence, but blanket surveillance, dragnet surveillance of everybody is not effective. And it's extremely expensive. We're barking up the wrong tree here.
Yeah.
We should raise questions and, investigate people for whom we have warrants, for whom there is reason to suspect that they are engaged in illegal or dangerous activity and who are actually threats. But to consider everyday citizens a threat, it basically violates the essential tenets of democracy, and we've seen that it makes finding the valuable information even more impossible. So it is a failed system.
Yeah.
But I think the other point here is that the answer here is not simply find the bad guys before they attack, but let's actually pull the rug out from under them to start with. We can dismantle ISIS. We created
it, yeah.
We created ISIS. We can dismantle ISIS, and we can dismantle further future security threats by undoing what is creating ISIS. So that means these horrific wars and massive slaughter of civilians. The horror that just took place in Paris is much like the horror that's been taking place in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria on a daily basis. That is the best recruiting tool imaginable for the terrorist groups. So our current foreign policy is our own greatest enemy right now. And furthermore, our allies have been funding ISIS, so we need to get the Saudis to stop funding ISIS. We ourselves have been directly or indirectly supplying arms to ISIS. The people that we train who then defect and move over, they are the troops in ISIS. We supply 80% of the weapons to the Middle East. So we could lead an arms embargo to basically disarm ISIS. We can do that now. We can ask our friends Turkey to please close their border to the flow of militias across their border to support and reinforce ISIS. We can ask our allies in Iraq to please stop buying the oil of ISIS on the black market. And that is a pretty complete plan to essentially cut the legs out from under of ISIS and dismantle it. To go in with more bombs and drones or special ops, which are all in practice right now, is to ensure that we are guaranteeing the next ISIS. And you have to ask, how much amnesia do these guys have on Capitol Hill, Democrats and Republicans, who are talking about doing more of what has been failing us since Vietnam, going in and shooting them up when you're talking about not your old-fashioned army that's dressed in their red coats. That doesn't work. You cannot assault a guerrilla army using old-fashioned techniques. You have to stop funding them. You have to stop arming them. You have to stop allowing reinforcements to cross the border. It's not rocket science how to do this. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have a foreign policy whose main mission is to sell weapons.
To wreak havoc, yeah.
We wreak havoc and therefore sell more weapons for the weapons industry, and likewise to ensure routes of fossil fuel, either supply or transportation. So between the weapons industry and the fossil fuel industry, we've got the wrong guys calling the shots in Washington, D.C. on foreign policy. We need a foreign policy that actually serves the American people. Our plan for the Green New Deal basically ensures that wars for oil become a thing of the past. It ensures that we will have abundant, healthy energy resources here, wind, water, and sun by 2030. So it takes the momentum out, it takes the steam out from this disastrous foreign policy aimed towards total economic and military domination, which is blowing back at us madly, creating failed states and terrorism and massive refugee migrations, all of which is coming home to roost. So we don't have a choice now. We really need to stand up and do the right thing and join the community of nations that has been trying to do the right thing in spite of the hammer that the U.S. and the largest military, more than the next 7 biggest all combined world over, this hammer that we have been bringing down over the rest of the world that is destroying the climate, is destroying any semblance of peace and security, and has also now rendered nuclear confrontation another real and present danger. So on the basis of those 3 really dramatic dangers, we need an about face to a policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy.
Absolutely. I've been talking a lot with my friends, and a few years ago when I moved back to the U.S. from Europe, I was kind of like, okay, I'm living in the U.S. now. This country is not so bad. You know, it could be worse. It could be like Eastern Europe. It could be like Africa or the Middle East in terms of the tumult. But after living here for a couple years and noticing just the tension and the anger and just like everything that feels like it's about to explode, I am talking to my friends again. I'm like, hey, like we could go to Europe, we could get free education, we could live in a different place. But at the same time, it's like I do believe in America, and I think that like there are some qualities to the country that are very good. What would you say to someone who's thinking about moving? Like, why would you encourage them not to move, or would you encourage them to move and like be an activist from the outside?
Great. So one thing I would say is that you can move away geographically, but you cannot move away politically. The problems that are raging inside of America are really raging everywhere else. And on the pathway that we're on, you have a multinational corporate government, which is essentially taking over everywhere. If it's allowed to continue, you're not going to have free education around the world or health care. So it's not like you can leave this battle behind. This battle has dimensions that now go far beyond our borders. So it's not as though that's even an option. But the other one I would say is really important is, well, a couple of them. One is that we have to fight this battle here, because the corporate predator, these multinational predators, are really coming out of America. And they have to be conquered here in America. We have to regain human rights and end the usurping of human rights by corporate rights. We need to restore our rights and put an end to the rights of corporate personhood. And just the political battles that have to be fought anywhere have to be fought here as well. So we need you here. And furthermore, let me say this, people have been browbeaten into thinking that we're powerless. In the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. 1 out of every 2 Americans now is in poverty or low income, heading to poverty. 40 million young people are in debt without a way out. 1 in 3 African American men is held hostage by the prison state. Latinos, are, and immigrants in general, are facing the threat of deportation, and yes, and terrible mistreatment. Likewise, in the Black Lives Matter movement, police violence is an issue. You start adding these numbers up, and we have not just a quorum, we have a majority here, potentially even a supermajority.
Yeah.
There are 40 million young people alone. If they get into their rebellious heads, the idea that they can come out and check the green box to end debt, because there's only one campaign in the presidential race that will put an end to student debt, 40 million young people is actually enough to take over the election.
Yeah.
I can't fault young people at all for apathy in a system that has basically thrown you under the bus.
Yeah.
So why should people pay attention? However, it's really important to get the word out that you don't have to get thrown under the bus. In fact, you can take over the bus. You not only need to be under the bus, you can be in the bus, you can be driving the bus.
Take over the school bus.
You can own the bus, you have the numbers to do that. And we want to get that simple message out to young people. Just come out and vote. Register to vote now, register green, because that's where debt liberation is. Register now. It's not only debt liberation, it's free public higher education, it's healthcare as a human right, and it's the right to a job, a full-time job and a living wage job. So we can bring the decency and security that they used to have over in Europe, we can ensure that we have it here by standing up now, because we have the numbers. This is a wake-up moment.
Yeah.
This is a wake-up moment. It's a transformative moment. This is the Hail Mary moment.
Yeah.
We're going over the waterfall if we don't act now. If we do act now, we have the numbers and we have the solutions to actually make this work on jobs, on the climate, on global peace and security, on education and healthcare. This is not rocket science. This is about standing up, forgetting the lesser evil, and fighting for the greater good.
So one thing, I first heard about your campaign, I read an editorial in Syracuse newspaper that you wrote about when you were handcuffed, when you attended the Democratic debate. And that really struck me, that really opened my eyes to just how corrupt, Obama was touted as this liberator, as, this savior. And when I read that, I was like, it's a sham, it's all a sham. And so would you go into detail more about what happened to you? Because I'm
Sure.
I was really just caught off guard when I read that.
And this is what they didn't want you to know, and this is why we were taken to a dark site and held there until the press had all gone home, because they are terrified that people should get word that they actually have a choice. So we were at the presidential debate. It might have been the last one. I think it was the last one. It was at Hofstra University on Long Island.
Right.
And my running mate and I attended with the hope of getting in to just be in the audience and bear witness, because we should have been in the debate. We were on the ballot for 85% of voters. Voters deserved to know that they had a range of choices. They weren't locked down to these two business as usual political parties that had minor differences around the margins, but if you listen to that debate, they basically agreed with each other on almost all counts, on warmongering, on this, on more coal plants and pipelines, and Obama was bragging about how many pipelines he built, and miles of pipeline to wrap around the earth once or more, I don't know. So we thought voters had a right. So we tried to get into the campus to listen to the debate, and we were arrested for trying to get in. They need to control their audience, they need an audience that's going to cheer madly. So they won't let just any old member of the public come out and witness these debates, and certainly not a presidential candidate that represented another option. So we were arrested trying to get in. We were handcuffed. We were taken by the security forces to and Secret Service actually, of Secret Service and police, to a dark site. And actually, our campaign was able to find out by talking to undisclosed sources. They were able to track down where we were, and they called a lot of police stations and found out where it wasn't, and they were able to sort of hone in on us. They showed up, and they were told that they would be arrested if they didn't leave the premises. They were not even allowed to stay in the parking lot or be anywhere near, because they weren't supposed to know where we were, and they didn't want anybody else to know. So we were taken to this dark site. There were approximately 16 Secret Service and police.
Wow.
It was a huge
God.
converted police facility. It was looked like an old gym or something that had been converted. My running mate and I were the only people there initially. Then eventually they brought in a reporter, a journalist, an independent media journalist, who was supposed to be covering Chelsea Manning's trial the next day. They arrested this journalist for taking pictures of Secret Service taking pictures. So this journalist was taking pictures back at the spy state that didn't want pictures taken, so they arrested him. So it was the three of us, basically political prisoners, that were being held in this dark site. We were handcuffed to these metal chairs tightly for 7 hours, and we were released without cell phones, without jackets. We were basically turned out into the street without any way to contact anyone late at night on a, in November, out into the freezing cold, to just sort of walk the streets until we could find some kind person that allowed us to use their cell phones for us to get back in touch. But that's how scared they are that word should get out that people actually have a choice that is of, by, and for the people.
And what would you say? I really liked what you said earlier about the press. Like, their mission is to about the affliction and the oppressed. I forgot how you worded it.
Yes.
It's to comfort the afflicted and
afflict the comfortable.
Afflict the comfortable. Yeah.
Right. That is supposed to be sort of the moral mission of a free press. If a free press simply comforts the comfortable and afflicts the afflicted, that's oligarchy, that's aristocracy.
Pointless, yeah.
Why, really? A free press is supposed to ensure that the questions are asked of the powerful all the time. They're not supposed to empower the powerful, but that's what they do. So, that's how, it's not just independent campaigns that are locked out, it's young people that are locked out. It's African Americans who are trying to walk down the street without being assaulted, or to drive a car without being shot. These are the kinds of questions that should be asked, that, where the press has given up the goat. And when people say to me, isn't it hopeless? Why are you bothering running?
Yeah.
I say, well, change the pronoun there. It's not me. It's not me that's at stake. What about young people who are at stake? Is it hopeless for them? Is it hopeless for African Americans who want to end police violence? Is it hopeless for people who can't afford health care, even through Obamacare? Are you telling us it's hopeless? If you're saying that, you are telling us that we do not have a democracy, which is reason for us all to rise up right now and to fight against what you appear to be defending.
Exactly. They're defending a lack of democracy.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's scary.
If you think it's hopeless, Mr. Representative of the corporate press, isn't it your responsibility to make it hopeful by opening up this discussion?
Yeah, and what do you think about, this is something that really concerns me and so many other people my age, in terms of universities and colleges in the States, for instance, even the UNC system, we can't even have a free press there. We're pretty much under the grasp and control of the administration. And then with, colleges all across the country that have corporate deals that are funded, and I don't even know, it just seems like a twisted web of just bureaucracy and money. And what do you think has to happen in order for this system to be dismantled? It just seems, thinking about it my age, it just seems so complex, and it would take so much work to dismantle that.
That's exactly what they want you to think. They want you to think that you are marginal, that your values and your vision is at the fringe, and that it's hopeless. That is their game plan. Because if you're hopeless, then you're powerless. But the reality is to reject the lesser evil, to reject their propaganda, to reject the powerlessness and the hopelessness that they're trying so hard to convince you of, because they are quaking in their boots. When I was tricked into running for office for the first time, back in 2002, running against Mitt Romney for governor, we were able to fight our way into a debate. And inside that debate hall, which didn't have an audience, it was just the candidates and the moderator, I spoke up for the everyday public interest agenda: jobs, healthcare and education as a human right, cutting the military, greening our energy system. Even back then, educating the whole student for lifetime learning, not to a standardized high-stakes test. Those ideas went over like a lead balloon inside this debate hall, which was just the candidates and the moderator. But when we walked out, I was mobbed by the press for the first time and the last time. They have since been otherwise instructed. And, and what they said to me was that you won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. And that like completely changed my thinking about this whole process. I had the sense, you know, I was doing this out of kind of my moral responsibility, but felt like, oh, it was pretty hopeless. And then I realized, oh my God, it's not hopeless at all. We have won in the court of public opinion, which is the hardest place to win. We have 2 public relations agents that you could not buy for billions of dollars. One is the climate and the other one is the economy. And they have been persuading people to win them over to the right side of history, and people have been won over. So the fact that the political establishment works so hard to silence us is evidence of their fear and how powerful we are. In my view, this is all about communicating to each other, mobilizing each other. 40 million strong, we are unstoppable. 40 million is the number of young people who are in debt. If we can just get the word out to young people in debt, come on out, have a party, go to your voting booth, cancel your debt by voting green, and then let's have an after party, a victory party. Because if 40 million people come out, debt is over, free public higher education is around the corner, and all kinds of other things. But we can win a 3-way race with a little more than 40 million votes. It depends on turnout. Normally it's around 120 million, possibly a little bit more. So 40 million is sort of what it takes. Throw in 25 million Latinos who have learned that Democrats,
candidate for them.
really, and that the Democrats are the party of deportations. Republicans are the party of hate and fear-mongering. And that's 25 million Latinos who vote. And once students lead the charge, and students are always the ones who lead the charge in a time of transformation and social upheaval, it's always the younger generation that finds our way forward, which is why it's so important that we liberate our younger generation from debt peonage right now, because it knocks you out of political activity. And without the younger generation to re-envision and reimagine our society and our future, all hope is lost. So it's not just good for the students, it's good for all of us. And it can actually win this race and can change our political dynamics right now. Starting on November 8th, we actually can have that political revolution. It won't happen inside of the Democratic Party, but it will happen because young people wake up to their power, their power. It's powerlessness that makes them indifferent. Once word gets out that the power is in your hands, we will see that turn on its head overnight.
It's beautiful, yes. Completely agree. So one thing also I was curious about was your position on banks. And I was wondering, would you bring back the Glass-Steagall Act if you could?
And more. So the Glass-Steagall Act is a very important protection so that the investment bankers are not gambling with public money. Right now, they can do that. And they can do all kinds of other abuses that are, I mean, they're doing that, you know? They're doing that big time. In fact, the banks are bigger and more consolidated than they were before the crash in 2007. So there's every reason for us to bring back Glass-Steagall, but not only that, we should break up the big banks right now.
Yeah.
We need public ownership of the banks. We need banks in the public interest, not banks for the private interest. Same goes for the Federal Reserve, which needs to be a public institution which is transparent and run on behalf of taxpayers and America, not on behalf of private banks and their profits. And we need to create those public banks not only at the national level but at the community level. We need public banks which will be transformative in terms of our public budgets to basically reduce borrowing essentially to the size of the loan and not have to pay enormous interest rates for municipalities, for public interest and state budgets to be able to draw on our own banking system, not on a predatory banking system, will save us so much money and put dollars back into our budgets that enable us to meet human needs. This is a win-win. The post office used to provide this, and there's a movement now to restore public banking through the post office, which is one way we could get that up and running right now.
Yeah, and the post office has been kind of on the decline for a while, which is really sad.
Because it's under attack.
Yeah.
Right, this is no failing of the post office. This was a specific attack by Congress to, to again privatize a public resource.
Yeah, I remember I went to the post office and I asked for a job, and like the guy had just looked at me and he was like, ha ha ha.
Yes.
It was so awkward. I was like, all right. I know it's bad. I'm sorry. But yeah, so if you were to say what the number one problem in America was, which one would you choose and why?
I think we have two crises that come together. So one is the climate crisis and the other one is the economic crisis, and they are inseparable. Contrary to the mythology out there, you can't just choose one because you got to fix them both. You can't fix the economy without also fixing the climate and the ecosystems that the economy depends on. And likewise, you can't fix the climate unless you take care of the people and the economy. So they need to be fixed together. That's what our Green New Deal is about. The Green New Deal basically creates 20 million jobs, full-time jobs, living wage jobs that green our economy to 100% clean renewable energy by 2030. That means declaring an emergency, as we did after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It took us 6 months to transform the economy to a wartime footing. In 15 years, we can transform the economy to a totally green footing, 100%. Phase out nuclear and fossil fuel, decommission them safely now while it can still be done, and before the floodwaters seriously start rising and detonate the nuclear power plants, or by way of drought. I mean, there are just so many ways that they can become another Chernobyl. So these are catastrophes that are all sort of bound up in this one issue of the climate and our energy crisis, which can be fixed through the Green New Deal, creating the jobs that move us to 100% clean renewable energy, also to a healthy, sustainable food system and public transportation. Those are sort of three areas of focus. And we include in that meeting human needs as well. So we have social services, child care, home care, elder, et cetera. We train people up and we provide the funding for that. And it turns out it pays for itself, and I'll explain in a minute. But in one fell swoop, we revive the economy, we turn the tide on climate change, and importantly, we make wars for oil obsolete by moving to 100% clean renewable energy. There is no longer a justification or a rationale for these horrific, immoral, catastrophic wars that are blowing back at us. So this is many solutions rolled into one, and the windfall from this is that our health gets so much better the minute we end the use of these toxic fossil fuels and all of their derivatives and pollutants, that savings alone from sick care we don't have to do is enough to actually pay the costs of the green energy conversion. It's actually rather staggering. This has been worked out in detail, both by modeling studies, but it's also a real-world development that actually happened in Cuba, when their oil pipeline went down, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they got so much healthier. Their death rates from diabetes went down 50%. Their death rates from heart attacks and strokes went down 25 to 35%. Their obesity rates went down 50%. All these amazing things happened when they had to transform overnight to a healthy diet, a healthy energy system, and a system of transportation that allowed them to integrate activity into getting where they were going again. We can do all of that. It cost them $0 to have a health revolution we cannot buy with $3 trillion a year is what we spend, not on a, it's not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system that we're spending $3 trillion a year on. So the Green New Deal, it's many solutions wrapped into one. If I'd have to say there's one crisis, that is it. You know, it's this economic, ecological crisis, a systemic crisis of a predatory system. We can change that to a system that puts people over profit, that puts the planet over profit and peace over profit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So one of the things also that struck me was the Divestment Coalition on campus. They're very much against fossil fuels, the university investing in fossil fuels. And they went to speak to the chancellor and during her open office hours, and they kind of not confronted her in like an aggressive way, but just in a very cordial way. And they said, they proposed, you know, like divesting and how it would be good for the school because a lot of the schools, particularly in Asheville, they promote green energy and this, but it's kind of like a pseudo campaign. And she was like, well, that's nice, but no. So what do you think? And they were discouraged by that, obviously, and they were like, yeah, I don't know about our campaign, but then after a while they got more motivated again. What do you think it's going to take for students to realize they have to fight for the environment at all costs? Like, this is their future, and if they don't fight for it, then it's going to go sour pretty quickly.
Yes. I think the name of the game is linking these issues. And for example, in the Green New Deal, we link jobs and the economy with the climate, and we also bring in the need to liberate students from debt so that we can get to that place. So it's very hard for people to think about the climate when they can hardly figure out where their next meal is coming from and how they're going to stay off the streets. This is why this system right now of debt peonage for young people is so dangerous politically. So, you know, in my view, the goal here is not to, it's not so much to activate students, but rather to liberate students. We need to liberate students from debt, and then they can take on all kinds of things. And they will take on all kinds of things. So I will be supporting, you know, your efforts on campus.
Thank you.
In fact, we're really encouraging campus chapters for the campaign that allow us to bring this message there. This message of empowerment to young people that point out there's a solution and it's not very many months away. We can actually end student debt on November 8th. Come out and end student debt, and then we can deal with a whole bunch of other solutions for these problems they tell you just can't be solved. Please go home. Go to bed, be depressed, don't get out, because it's hopeless, you know. Please believe me, you know, I'm a politician, trust me, you know, it's hopeless. That's kind of the line that they are feeding young people. That needs to be rejected.
It's like fast food.
Exactly, you know, here's, you know, that's our motto, reject the lesser evil, fight for the greater good, and we need to liberate young people in order to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was wonderful.
It was wonderful talking with you, and I look forward to working with you on the campus.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be there tonight. I think it'll be a really good, positive event.
Great.
I have some friends who are very interested.
Oh, exciting. Great. Bring some of those apathetic young people and
I will.
Challenge them.
I'm posting on my Facebook. I'm like, guys, you have to come to this. It's going to be awesome.
Yes. Great. The, you know, the solution to apathy and depression is, you know, is power.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I remember one time, and this is just a personal anecdote, like, I remember, I'm not into sports at all, but I have a friend who's a really good classical musician. He was in a band, the marching band at the University of Florida, and they were performing at a football game, and there was nothing else to do that day, and he was like, you should come to the football game. I was like, but I went and sat in the nosebleed seats, and one of the things I realized, and that was actually a really good decision to go to the game that day, is the power of people in numbers. Like, it just like had me like riveting, like how many people, like they were shoving fast food in their faces and painting, you know, their faces like different colors for the team, and they were like so like, it was an energy beyond anything I had experienced before. I was like, God, like if people could actually like be fighting in these numbers for their rights.
Well, you know what's really interesting? I mean, football is a really good example because that's how the University of Missouri just, you know, showed their chancellor and their chairman of the board, or the president, I think, showed them the door. You know, after all these horrible racist, you know, developments on campus and the failure of the administration to take racism as a serious issue, the students stood up, and then the football team stood up, which really gets to the pocketbook. Yes. And it's very interesting that you bring this up because we're seeing, you know, on the ground, the mobilization of the African American community on climate justice, recognizing that it's African Americans who paid the price with Katrina, you know, who still haven't come back, in like in 100,000 have not been able to come back because this is, you know, this is environmental racism is what's going on with the climate crisis. And so to bring in, you know, I think to start a dialogue with the football team, that another, you know, another aspect of racism that we need their help on, that we need to engage them in the fight against racism, not only in police violence, but racism in the climate crisis that is coming down on the heads of the community of color all over the world, harder than anywhere else. That would be a wonderful dialogue to begin. Yeah, let's try to get some football players tonight.
Yeah, that would, oh my God, that would be really cool. And especially, like, did you see the video of the journalist who tried to get into the group, the Mizzou group that were gathering? It was supposedly a safe space. And it was really interesting because we were discussing this in my class. And what do you think about that? Because that's something, I think it's like free speech. And then I totally agree with Mizzou's cause as well, you know, to like protest against the racism, but it was just like such an intersection of like different things because the press represents, you know, so much like negativity for people of color. Like, what do you think of that incident?
You know, I guess I don't know the details of that incident. The one I was aware of was an independent journalist who wanted to cover the confrontation, and it was the administration who threw him out. They got security to take the press out because they didn't want the press reporting, you know, on what was going on. So, you know, I think the bottom line is that we need an accountable press. You know, we need a free press. We have a name for the corporate press. We call them the O press, or the re press, if you know what I mean, instead of the real press, which is the independent press. But I think the larger point here is that, you know, we need a unified coalition for people, planet, and peace over profit. And when we get together, whether it's football teams, African Americans, the climate justice movement, the living wage movement, you know, you bring us together, we are an unstoppable force. And on campus, we can bring together that coalition. And I think to engage the dialogue between Black Lives Matter or the Moral Monday movement and the climate movement and the student debt movement, this is where we become that unstoppable force that can take our future back and build the world that we deserve, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. We can create that now. It's not just in our hopes, it's not just in our dreams, it's in our hands.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Likewise.
Thank you for sticking up for my generation. That means so much.
Oh my God. Well, it's for all of our sake. You know, it's for your sake, it's for all of our sake. We got to do that and make it happen right now. And we could turn this around on November 8th.
I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
Well, we'll get the word out. You know, and whether you actually win the election or you win the day by establishing that there is now an independent base of resistance from which we can build, then we, you know, we're on our way.
Exactly. Just sort of drawing upon, like, especially my generation, their tentativity toward, like, the two-party system and just toward our country in general. I, like, noticed so many people who were like...
Who wants to engage, and they are staying home in record numbers. And I think for people to know that, you know, whether we get 5% or 25 or 55.
Yeah.
In a three-way race, technically 34% can win the vote, you know. So, I mean, there are all kinds of ways that we can win, but you can even win in a rigged system. You may not win the vote count around first time, you know, and there are all kinds of ways it's rigged, but you can establish a base from which you then really challenge power. Richard Nixon gave all kinds of concessions to the movement. He was a, you know, a very repressive, oppressive, you know, war hawk of a president, crook, yes. But he, you know, he brought the troops home from Vietnam. He passed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act and established the EPA and OSHA, and we got women's right to choose from the Supreme Court. How do we do that? Not by the lesser evil, but by standing up for who we are and what it is that we believe in. Democracy needs a moral compass. Silencing yourself and allowing a corporate lesser evil to speak for you is a prescription for disaster, because people will not come out and vote for the lesser evil. So it's either evil or it's good, you know? And I don't mean that in sort of religious terms, but as a practical matter, we're told to support the lesser evil all the time. And it's an absolute disaster. We need to stand up for the public good. We need to stand up for the greater good. It's us or no one. Democracy needs that moral compass. If we silence ourselves, we've basically thrown in the towel and said, here, corporate America, who runs the corporate parties, you decide. In the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. We need to stand up and be that demand, then we can build on that demand. And whether we get 5% or 55%, we have won the day. Once we stand up and we stand together, we will be an unstoppable force.
I agree. It's good to look forward and be positive.
And to know our power.
To recognize it.
Really, so thank you for...
Thank you for your time.
Yes, and thank you for leading the charge.
Absolutely. I'm trying. Trying to motivate
Keep
people.
it up. Yeah, oh, it's wonderful. We'll just get them there tonight.
Yeah, I will.
As best as you can, and we'll get the word out.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
I'll see you tonight.
Great.
Again.
Well, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.